Welcome to the Aegex Webinar. Today we're going to hear from SensorInsight and Steven Gerhardt, who is the partner and co-founder of SensorInsight, which is one of Aegex's primary technology partners. SensorInsight is a software platform, or developed a software platform for advanced IoT applications that provides real-time monitoring and data analytics. First, I'd like to address all of your attention to your GoToWebinar control panel on your screen. You will see there that there's a section called Questions. During the presentation, you may type in your questions, and at the end, we will take about 5 minutes at the end of the presentation to address those. If we do not get to your question on this call, we will answer you by email directly. Again, thank you for joining us. And first, we're going to hear from Tom Venturette, CEO of Aegex, for a quick introduction.
Thanks, Lee. This particular webinar was scheduled as our first key one following the big event last week, the Operation Convergent Response. Those of you that took part, we appreciate your attendance, and we're able to see how sensors and devices and communications all pulling together from lots of different vendors, 45, within a couple days, could start creating a true operational picture of what's happening in an environment, a hazardous environment. SensorInsight was, in our partnership with them over the previous period, maybe 6 months, we were able to bring together our sensors, other sensors that they can provide, some designed for hazardous environments, others capturing ambient information, pulling it all together, putting it into an easy display so people at the scene can react to new information as it's occurring. We did all that, and we actually connected everything just within a couple days. And I think that's really critical, where lots of companies around the world are planning their IoT strategy, particularly those in hazardous environments. Up until now, there hasn't been a lot of ability to capture that information. Within days, we were able to already start pulling that information together, actually have some artificial intelligence start detecting anomalies and identifying changes in the environment so people could react. So it was a remarkable opportunity to see all that happen live. Now, as we kind of move forward, I want Steven to give everyone a good background of how technologies were used in other environments, and now how we're collaborating, we can pull that into those hazardous environments, real mission-critical information. So go for it, Steven. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Appreciate being here. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for everybody joining. So as Lee mentioned, this business, software business, is about 6 years old. I'm the co-founder of the technology, as well as a partner in the business and a parent organization called Element Blue. Again, the focus is for me today, share about our platform, the flexibility and scalability as to one of the strongest characteristics, as Tom mentioned, our ability to move into, from concept and vision that we were, planning and adjusting to literally a deployment that, within a matter of 48 hours took place from, hazardous environment, intrinsically safe type of operating environment into a software platform that then can scale and flexibly integrate to other providers as well. So again, thanks for having me today. Let's see. And turning the chart here. So this is just to start with a summary for everyone. Our vision is to really, in a packaged, scalable, and replicated way, bring integrated software into the picture of sensing environments, net new sensing opportunities, environments with a number of industries. And of course, in Aegex perspective, also deploy that to hardware such that they support with the Aegex 10 tablet. So you get at the right-hand side of the screen a visualization from from sensor to configuration of a pre-configured and shippable package solution, collecting real time and submitting that to a cloud-based control environment across a number of industries and packages. So right now we are primarily covering with just about 100 customers on the platform, majority of in a solution area called environmental monitoring, of which was demonstrated at in Perry at the Guardian Centers, which I'll go into in this presentation, as well as a larger space in the agriculture space. We have kitted solutions in several different farming environments, crop environments, namely grape growing and viticulture arena, with almost 40 customers in just that arena. We're doing some other things in pilots with things that you see here in manufacturing, from large-scale operators to some small ones, some people counting and crowd monitoring with retail, and then some healthcare asset tracking and monitoring, actually in sensory, what we call the SensorInsight at home environment for sensing opportunities in homes where you need to know with dementia state or elderly care what's going on in that home environment. And then lastly, asset management, the integration of all of the assets, critical assets and environment as a theme for solutions we also have gotten into. I'll touch on a few solution areas here specifically. One, as I mentioned, environmental monitoring, air quality, probably our biggest aspect of opportunity, from smart cities to manufacturing to even oil and gas types of opportunities with hazardous environments. We do a number of things here based on primarily the Labellian platform sensor application and integrating other now intrinsically safe environments sensors, but do these types of quality measurement and controls. You can see we have a geophysical kind of data map visualization, and then some generally graphical display of the sensor information from the controls of the sensors. And again, just a picture does 1,000 words here, hopefully, and a little bit of the type of environment we see for a graphical display of, in this case, weather stations and air quality control monitoring around a small area. And one aspect of this is that we've embedded algorithms, in this case with the air quality, with something called EPA sensor scale, where that particular type of algorithm tells in a standardized way that the EBA has published what that environment looks like, what we call the air quality index. And this air quality index is widely published, widely used global set of numbers that you can see for and types of thresholds with air quality monitoring. Couple more, precision agriculture is a general play. We've entered the market again, as I said, with a special kitted solution, including soil temperature moisture monitoring, even stem growth and leaf wetness, to general monitoring around irrigation, water runoff, and those types of things. And then the air quality and weather, as you've seen, integrated into that environment. Again, to just look at a lot of data that farmers may have not had recognition for, primarily for the result of crop quality and the consistency of the yield. Many people talk about the increase in yield. Primarily, it's consistency and quality of that yield that we see that they're after, and using a number of these kinds of data measurements to get to that result. Last, in the use case category, people counting and crowd monitoring has been a hot topic in what you can do with net new sensing opportunities in retail environments or large entertainment facilities, those types of things, entertainment venues. And very interesting in characteristics, even in restaurants, what you can determine for people flow and high times, peak times, And these are pretty cheap ways to, there's pretty cheap ways to get this kind of characteristics and information flow. And if you can do it into a cloud environment, we've seen a lot of interest there around what we can do and capability. So let me roll through a couple of things we've done, and some of our oldest ones, even 4 or 5 years ago. This is one that's been enduring now for a little over 4 years. In over 1,000 water points, mostly in Kenya and southern Ethiopia, for Oxfam, we built a dashboard and visualization capability. We call it a fused view of information for the people, the tribesmen, the animals, everybody consuming a particular water point, and the mission such that Oxfam can mobilize water resources in that region. And it's been widely successful for them, and the monitoring of information that they get from those water points. And we're going into a second phase to do more automation control around the well and the tanks that they mobilize for supplemental water activity in drought conditions. In Melbourne, we worked with just another example of the type of information that a utility may want to collect. And here you see a different type of visualization with the capability of the reporting that we now call SensorInsight Compare, which is a quick visualization dashboard for components. And in this case, water balance, consumption forecast, even water cost models, and growth forecasting were some of the things that we were doing with the water utility and a general net new sensing capability of the infrastructure and rolling data into our system. In more in the industrial space and oil and gas and agriculture, we are working with a number of intrinsically safe providers as well for hazardous areas of tank monitoring, thief hatch monitors, for example, for those tanks. In some of the larger, super majors of providers out there, the largest oil and gas companies, for example, they may open thief hatches upwards of 15,000 times a month. When they can reduce this to just, literally less than 1% of that, it really drives down obviously their cost of logistics and automated tank monitoring. But also, number one, it is a safety and health issue, and a lot of hazardous conditions around those tanks. And in fact, even so much that automated tank gauging has gotten to the point where they are removing catwalks for these large 15, like for example, what you see here, these 15-foot tanks. And you see also a geophysical map in Texas where we've got a couple of stations running today. And I think this is the last example we have, but in agriculture, as I mentioned, we're really moving forward with collecting and monitoring environmental field conditions, as well as pulling in the actual the agronomic variables to those soil conditions and the weather conditions. So let me mention a couple of things unique, I think, with our platform, the flexibility and the state we're at. One key point is that we kind of cut our teeth in the integration space, in the enterprise space over the last 15 years. And so when we came to this application to build out kind of the middle component, maybe some call middleware component, a strong suit of ours was building in the adapters and API capability to push that data to wherever it may need to go. So again, one of the pieces that we feel is a strong and differentiated environment for us is the flexibility we have to push to many of the majors in the cloud provider world today, because we know we walk into enterprises that have already picked, a cloud major or a particular IoT back-end major that we want to integrate to, and we do that, out of the box with the majors like Bluemix and Azure or ThingWorks, and flow the data on the left-hand side of the screen from an integrate perspective into one of those providers. And ultimately that ends up in potentially a visualization, as you see below, where you see a time-lapse variable of an advertising van that's moving down the strip of Las Vegas and doing people count concentration against that advertising vehicle. Those kinds of neat characteristics and visualizations could come from Power BI and Azure, for example. We secondarily we do have an application. We obviously on the visualization side, on the compare side, and I'll show you what we did at Guardian Centers just last week, and in terms of our flexibility and the types of characteristics you see in our application for thresholds and basic data comparison models to the enrichment of that data from other systems to transformation into these maps, dashboards, and other types of analytics, and talk a few minutes about analytics providers also that we're integrated with. So to that note, much of this might look familiar if you're interested in this space or been in this space at any length, right? So, but this is generally what I'd say a reference architecture layer. If you look on the left-hand side of our ecosystem of ecosystems, right, in the IoT world, and having been in here, this is our 6th year in just this business. We have worked with a number of the lead players, and are very happy to more recently, as Tom mentioned, add to our sensor list and work with Aegex, as well as Similarity in the Aegex portal at the Guardian Center. And I'll talk a little bit more about Similarity and what they brought to that as well. So jumping into Guardian Center, and again, maybe there's a few just not familiar as much with those that were there. We deployed in fairly quick fashion, again, a portal to cover the environment for a couple of days through 5 scenarios on an old, actually retired nuclear military facility with these intrinsically safe devices and a network of those, but had to build out obviously all of the infrastructure in the middle to get that to our platform and deploy that in an integrated fashion with other partners. Some of those partners, obviously, we've talked a bit about Aegex Smart Sensor technology. Those were deployed in volatiles and gases that we wanted to monitor. The weather company, which one of the scenarios was a tornadic event that was being demonstrated, and what the devastation of that would be across the facility. So tracking the weather and alerting component for that was important and integrated from the weather company. Similarity is a algorithm provider for anomaly detection, and we're really excited about advancing our work with them and demonstrating more of what we can do around the anomalies and events that occur when you look at integrating their services and their algorithm services for flowing our data, which again we integrated with, and through our middleware component that I mentioned a couple of slides ago, was a pretty quick integration, and we're excited about more of what they have in their capability, and they're working all over the world in some really exciting projects for advanced anomaly detection in a variety of industries. And then lastly, where the circle is down here was a focus. And Tom and Verizon and many other friends out there that told the story through the Verizon Big Red truck and what we were doing at assimilating this data into a one Aegex portal here kind of event. Just a little bit about Labellium, the station that we supplied at the event, and also as an analogous to the scenarios and the use cases I mentioned earlier. It's a basic outdoor air quality monitoring station with a kitted solution and framework for sensors. These are general purpose sensors. They're not intrinsically safe sensors, but it is a fairly flexible platform, kind of now sandboxed and kitted in the industry for those that are doing Internet of Things projects. And we've combined that with our EPA air quality algorithm called the Sensor Scale Air Quality Index, which is now going to relate to other intrinsically safe sensor monitors that we're working with Aegex on at this point forward. Just a couple of things about the scenarios that we ran. We were providing in the Tornadic event scenario, a realistic look at what a dashboard operator or an operator holding an Aegex tablet would look at in terms of real-time information as the tornado, or whatever weather information we could provide from weather stations and general purpose weather service from the weather.com we could provide was integrated into the dashboard for tracking information, for visualization of that alerts and weather warnings. So from the chemical factory, there was quite a few sensors deployed at various levels. And again, we imagine that through this scenario, in a destructive, some kind of catastrophic event, we at that point still have a running scenario typical of getting information from these sensors and looking at it from a perspective of those that need to now go in and do some type of recovery or any kind of work around the facility. And so really applicable here in many of the things that we're attuned to in the news and things that have happened over the last decade with many of environments that need to be monitored such as this, and especially in a catastrophic event. So pulling that data together and understanding what's going on with those kinds of releases in an information portal like this is strategic, very strategic, and we see the wave of the future here for more and more plants to deploy net new sensing and cheap sensor opportunities. The last one we really deployed from our perspective and a part of the Aegex portal was the subway attack scenario. And again, the subway itself, the facility was concentrated with a number of sensors, intrinsically safe as well as general purpose, to look at data for particulate matter and dust and hazardous chemicals. Again, in the obvious, where we've seen in the news many times over and too many times of information that was needed for those that are in a recovery or in emergency management scenario. And so these are the types of gases that we were detecting live at the event and deployed again within a couple of days just to run this facility and run the scenarios. So that's what I had for today. Lee, I think I'll turn it back to you and be happy to open the door for any questions and go from there.
Terrific. Thank you, Steven. There is a question here about the industries that you serve. You mentioned, of course, agriculture, and here with the Guardian Centers project, the chemical plant, for example. What are your primary customers in what sectors?
So again, primarily our platform serves the manufacturing and agriculture sectors today. We are growing, with just a handful of customers and projects in some additional spaces. As I mentioned, SensorInsight at Home is a fairly new announcement for healthcare. About 4 months ago, we started a state-level project for sensoring, well over about 30 homes. We're just getting into a number of cases supported through heavy industrials. So anybody from an environmental monitoring standpoint, we think about heavy industry as projects we have on the board with mining and oil and gas as well. So there's kind of those two plays, but the heaviest, as I mentioned from the beginning, categorically manufacturing and agriculture today is where we're seeing the spread of those 100 customers.
Okay, great. Let's see if we have any other questions. If you do have a question, you can raise your hand or type it into the question box. Here's one more question. This is actually for Tom with Aegex. What is Aegex hearing from customers about IoT and starting their IoT strategy?
Thanks. We're hearing a lot of interesting things. We're dealing with a number of big global companies, their IT departments and so forth, and each one has a plan or planning a plan, you could say, around how do you connect everything. There's an understanding that a single sensor sitting out there that's a hydrogen sulfide sensor, it serves a critical purpose and for life safety. But in working with SensorInsight and their parent Element Blue, working with IBM Watson platform or the Microsoft people in Azure, information, even people that have been doing something for 100 years, a guy creating wine, a guy working on an oil rig, they think they know it, not saying they don't know their business, but what we have come to learn is very small, minute bits of data, things like weather, other external bits of information. You never know where that information is coming from. Vibration, temperature, light, humidity, all of it starts to play into a really great common picture. Even sound, a slight shift in pitch can tell us something. It's feeding all that into that platform. So what we're hearing from the customers is we want to start heading that way. We do see there's an ROI, there's a significant value in it. We can head off plant shutdowns, downtime, wellheads shutting down. We understand how we can do it. What we're actually hearing is, what are you guys thinking about? How do you start? And so the partnership with IBM brought us to SensorInsight, the Watson team, working together and saying, okay, there's not a lot of this history, obviously, in the oil and gas or big manufacturing world. We'll start with the devices, tablets, sensors, things like that that can actually go into the environment. We can look at other devices that aren't necessarily, that can sit on the periphery, continue to feed that platform with lots and lots of information. And so the simple steps, what we're hearing is, can you help us with that roadmap? And that's what we're working on right now is, and what we saw last week is, it just took a couple days and the machines were already learning. Similarity software was performing beautifully, and we were actually detecting things that people work down there weren't aware of. And so we could show that literally in days, a handful of sensors tells you mountains of information and allows them to run more efficient, more productive, and safer operations. So that's kind of what we're hearing. That's kind of what we're feeding back.
Okay, great. There's just one last question. It's really for both of you. They ask, how does the real world differ from being in this type of lab environment? And maybe Steven, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, sure. How does the real world differ? I think in the intrinsically safe hazardous category, let's say, of the real world, we are, there's still a work in progress, I think, from some of the sensing technology that we deployed. I think from a scenario of the data, of obviously the tablets that we demonstrated in the commercial realm, the platform is real, it's working, it's ready. But maybe on the sensor side would be my comment to what the facility wants to monitor. Maybe it's still a work in progress as to what people want to do with hardened sensing equipment. General purpose is out there. There's some specific applications in for hazardous environments, but the kind of stuff we want to do, I think, long term with permanent physical installations on air quality may still be, again, needed.
I think if I could add to that real quickly, what our ability to use a place like Guardian Center, a very large-scale facility, versus sitting in a lab and determining vibration as an indicator in the lab versus getting out into a place where we could legally release lots of chemicals. We could create lots of scenarios. We could model things up that you can't figure out in a refinery, in a chemical plant, in a pharmaceutical plant. You can't just borrow their facility to figure some of this stuff out. It's never been done before. So we can model that. That lab becomes as close to real as it gets. And so a lot of that learning is continuing. We've gone through lots of iterations of types of devices. And because SensorInsight also gives us not only the ability to aggregate all that information, easily to display it quickly, but it's also integrated into places like OSI, IBM Maximo, the solutions that are already out there in the field. Those guys are hungry for more information. It's easy to display that stuff on the tablet. So the lab is a dynamic place, as an ecosystem of all the partners coming in and trying it in effect as close to the real world as you can get. So I guess that's it.
Excellent. Terrific. I think with that, we have actually kind of run out of time. If we didn't get to your question right now, we can certainly answer that directly via email. So we'll have the panelists do that afterwards. I want to also direct everyone's attention to the fact that there's a handout here, which is Steven's presentation, which is available for you to download from this GoToWebinar session. Also, just thank you so much for attending, and look for our next Aegex webinar next month. We'll be announcing it shortly. Thank you again. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.